You're listening to the Self-Aware Leader Show, where we empower you to lead yourself and others with clarity and impact. And today, we have a master architect of career progression, Nate Dinet, the mind behind the step manager. If you've ever felt your career, and I know we have a ton of you guys that ask about career potential, if you felt that it was tied to someone else or wondered how to really own your path, how to get a promotion, how to have impactful leadership, Nate's insights today are exactly what you need. So let's unlock these next steps. Nate, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, sir. I'm excited to be here.
It's pretty cool. I want everybody to just run to your website right now. We'll have the links in the show note, the Step Manager, because you've got a super clear, big video on there. I was on there earlier this morning and last night. And one of the things that you talk about in the Step Manager, it's kind of built on the premise that there's 80% of our career growth depends on an individual's direct manager. Can you get into that a little bit? Like, why is it 80%?
Yeah, definitely. So it was a study that originally came out from Business Insider and then was later substantiated by Forbes, where any given point in time, any employee, their career trajectory is the sole responsibility and ultimately up to their line manager. So, 70 to 80% of your career growth is up to a person that you might not have the best relationship with or may not have any relationship with at all. And it's kind of, a lot of people struggle with that because it's pretty difficult to understand exactly what to do when you don't have a good line manager, or maybe you have a really good friendship with your line manager, but you're not exactly sure what to do with that or how to make it so that you can take the next step in your career or progress in a meaningful way. So, it's because the reason behind that is that the line manager is the one that is ultimately going to be in the room when every year promotions are decided. They're like, okay, who on your team deserves it? And if you're not on their radar during the annual review cycle, then it's not going to happen. So there's a lot of that dependency on a line manager, which is pretty much the exact reason why I came out with the Step Manager almost a decade ago.
What's crazy about it, and what's so scary is, and what you talk about, is the lack of training.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what are they doing? Is it just a hunch? Like, what are you depending on?
Yeah, it's really bad, actually. It's a shocking, because you usually get line managers that will get promoted because they're good at their job, right? So they're good at being technical at their job. So if you're an engineer or if you're in marketing, you're good because you are good at your skill set, whatever that is. And then the theory is that we're going to promote you because you are good at what you do, so you'll make others good at what you do. But there's very little support in terms of, okay, how the hell do you actually do that? What is the first step to becoming responsible for other people? And like there's a bunch of what I call fluff training out there that has a lot of great corporate buzzwords and increasing synergies and all that other stuff, but there's nothing really that's substantive that gives you the playbook or the blueprint to be able to go from, okay, I'm an individual contributor and now I'm managing a team. Oftentimes the people that used to be my peers, now what the hell do I do? There really isn't anything out there that exists to help corporate managers do that, other than the stuff that I've been able to put together since 2017.
Yeah, no, and I know you've spent over 15 years, as an advocate for employees, and you've transitioned through roles. You've been the manager, you've been the head of product, you've been the boss, you've been the consulting executive, and now you have the step manager. When you look at your extensive journey, what are some particular reoccurring observation or pivotal moments that solidified your conviction that the approach that we're going to get into, the step manager, was essential to help professionals?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it's the proof is in the pudding. When I work with clients and they have the same, or they have the same pain points. A lot of times I'll hear the same issues like, hey, I don't have the confidence to come in and say, like, did I really earn that salary? Or do you think I can go in there and ask for that much? I don't want them to, take it out on me if I'm batting out of league. And that's a recurring theme, is just the confidence in the fact that, do you know how much you're worth and how much you can ask for? That's a big one. And so we have a total solution around that. And then there's another one where it's like, I don't know how to handle even broaching the subject. How do I bring this up outside of the annual review process? How do I say I want more money without coming off really bad? So, personalized a negotiation script. And then how do I talk about myself that is in a way that doesn't make me sound like I'm super self-centered or make me sound like I'm totally out of touch? So there's these constant themes of, how do I even approach this? What's the first step that I should be doing? How can I position it? And then on the other side of the equation, if I do get a manager or somebody that is a manager and they're not used to being a manager, like, how do I handle growth for my team? How do I how am I supposed to be able to coach my team when I haven't been through their exact experiences? One of my clients just now, like a couple hours ago, was talking to me about he does a lot of leadership by experience, meaning he can only relate to them if he's gone through the same exact thing. So he struggles with that. How do you guide somebody? How do you have empathy with that? So we focus on a lot of building that empathy, and more importantly, building what your expectations are for your direct reports. So there's constant themes over and over and over again. As the industry has come up and down, and jobs have changed, and AI and all that other stuff, those real relationship driven and confidence driven and stakeholder driven needs are still there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like with your 15 plus year background, this diverse view kind of gave you this panoramic perspective of all these career challenges, and you've seen different roles, different companies, and with the coaching. What is kind of the why behind the step manager? Like, is it to be an advocate for employees? Like at the end of the day, what are you looking for? Not just for yourself, like personally, but for those that want to be a part of the program.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I am the advocate for the people that feel like they don't have anybody to turn to. The step manager, the name started out as sort of a joke, because I thought of it as like that trope of a kid that's waiting at the end of their driveway for their dad to come and bring him to like the big game of the baseball game, and he ends up not making him, blowing him off, and then their stepdad comes out and plays catch with them in the yard. It's like the manager you get to choose as the step manager, because I'm in your corner and I want you to be successful, and a lot of times I want you to have more money. I think everybody should be paid more, full stop, no matter what your role is, no matter where you are. Company profits are soaring, and yet wages haven't really increased a whole lot, and I think there's a fundamental challenge with that, and people aren't asking enough, basically, is the key. So, but yeah, that's how I started. The name originates in that, but now I found out it's more like, what is my next step in my career? And that's where the step comes in there. And I think as a goal, I want to help as many people as I can figure that out, find and associate what their fulfillment and what makes them happy and feel satisfied in their life. And we'll figure out the path together, and we'll figure out what those steps are. And oftentimes that leads to a promotion. Oftentimes that leads to you becoming a line manager. And that's great. And I'm happy for it. But if you're also, if you don't want to go the corporate route and you want to become an entrepreneur, let's figure out the path that way. Like, that doesn't have to be traditional. You don't have to follow a blueprint forward to becoming the next CEO of anything. It's more important to me that somebody walks away feeling satisfied, and they can they can exhale from their day, because you spend so much of your time working and grinding and growing and all that other stuff, but life is already overwhelming. Let's take it a little bit easier on ourselves and figure out what that next step might be. That's my mission. Help as many people as I can on that.
Yeah, and I know your core tenet of the step manager, is empowering individuals to take control. And I want to stop right there, because I think this is very important. You said earlier 80%. So if I'm vulnerable, if I have no control of my career trajectory, the route I'm going right now, what are some, just right off the bat, what are some strategies where I can, whether it may be improving my relationship to the manager, navigating progression, like you said, to evolve and become an entrepreneur and go in that direction? How do you take control of your career trajectory?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So I would say the first thing that is important is to understand your why. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? If you're in the right role, that's great. If you're not, let's figure out why. Like, what is the thing that drives you? Because if you don't have an association to your vocation or your job, and you're not satisfying a little bit of what makes you passionate, then you're going to be grinding forever, which not a lot of people have, or not everyone has the ability to kind of pivot into that. But let's figure out a path there. That's the first one. And to be able to unlock your career, if you're in a job and you're like, damn it, I'm under a really bad person, or I'm not sure exactly where to go. Then after you establish your why, then the first thing that I would suggest is that you do what's called like a stakeholder management diagram, and I call it the manager compass, where you understand what the motivations of your manager are, so that you can understand how they are positioned and what their motivators are and how they receive and give communication. And with that, you'll be able to determine, do I need to lean in more? Do I need to shape the way that I'm presenting myself more to my line manager? Or do I need to work on a separate stakeholder route? And most of the times it is like A or B. Whenever I'm working with somebody that's trying to get a promotion, we do that manager compass diagram or that manager compass exercise, and we determine, is the manager going to advocate for them and they just need to have more fuel to advocate for them? Or is the manager going to get in their way? And it's not necessarily like a nefarious way. Sometimes the managers are just not they're not ambitious, so they're not going to go and advocate for you. So we work on trying to understand what the influence centers are within an organization. So if you're like a software as a service company or any other sales driven organization, it's likely that the sales team has a lot of influence in there. So the first step would be, okay, who do you have on the sales team that could advocate for you? Who could be a good relationship for you to have? And how do we continue to develop and nurture those relationships so that when the time comes for you to go up to your manager or your skip line manager and say, hey, I've been doing really good work, X, Y, Z, what can we do here? Then you have somebody in the room that's going to advocate for you.
One of the things that we have a question, and it usually always pops up in our head is, do I work with this manager or do I work around them? Do I basically fuck them over and, like you said, weasel around and move around, and that may be the negative aspect of it. How do you know that? Like, is it me versus the manager, or is it me and the manager are going to become best buds?
Yeah, I think it's neither. I would just say it's important to understand what their motivations are and what their behavioral patterns are so that we can determine that, hey, we're not going to get what we need from the manager, because ultimately what we need is them to become an advocate for you. But a typical situation, or not a typical one, but I see one that I see a lot, is that you have a really strong manager or you have a really strong person that wants to get a promotion or wants to get some raise, but their manager has been at the organization forever, not super ambitious, not somebody that's going to climb ladders, and they're worried that they're going to go ask for more money than what their manager makes. So what do you do in that situation? And that one that tells me is that, hey, that manager is not going to be an advocate for our state, because they're not going to be like, hey, pay this guy more money or this gal more money. We're gonna have to figure out the pivot point there. So that would be, we're not going to make an adversary of the manager, but we're not going to focus our time and energy there. We're going to spend our time developing the other relationships and finding our pathway forward outside of our current org tree. Because right now it's a crazy time in corporate where like 2/3 of jobs are not in a traditional career ladder, meaning
100%.
you don't have, it's not like you go from project manager 1 to project manager 2 to manager of projects and then director of project management. That doesn't really exist anymore. Now it's very like, how can you kind of bob and weave your way through an organization to provide value? And the responsibility is all on the employee to make that happen. So that's a lot of what we do is defining, is the manager relationship going to be one that's going to be healthy for us to leverage, or do we need to find a different path forward?
Yeah, I love that. So that's kind of like, this is the core philosophy. Here's where we're at. Here's what we're doing. We're taking charge of our career, which we spend most of our time at work. We know this. We're going to identify the manager, where we're at, what we're going to be next. And Nate, you have a promotion accelerator program, and it features a foolproof accomplishment tracker, and it's using the CARA method. And I want you to kind of get into that because it sounds like it's incredible value. If our audience is seeking a better way to articulate their contributions, like you said, without being this narcissistic ego person, can you kind of unpack CARA for us, or CARA, however you pronounce it?
Yeah, I call it the CARA method. And what it stands for is the current activities, responsibilities, and above and beyond. So what I want everybody to do, you can do this. I have a free download of it, but it's pretty easy to just put those into an Excel sheet and put some bullet points into it. But every day or every week on Fridays, or whenever your natural conclusion is to your week, spend 30 minutes documenting it. Documenting facts and figures. Give me metrics. Focus on numbers of things that you did, percentages of things that were improved, or metrics that you can associate to. And the reason why I want you to start there is that those are, 1, great for your resume if you're ever trying to switch jobs, and 2, we begin to notice a pattern of the impact that you're having. So we start with the CARA method, so we get the facts and figures. Be as objective. What are your current responsibilities? What are your current activities? What are you spending all of your time on? Projects, initiatives, campaigns, whatever that is. Document them down. And where have you gone above and beyond outside of the normal scope of your role? Because I guarantee you 95% of you are doing something outside of the scope of your role. Then you basically have, that becomes your stump speech. That becomes your campaign to, move or make a concerted effort at getting promotion. And the reason why it becomes that is because the very next thing after we get the CARA method is to determine what are the business drivers that you're having an impact on. What are the big things that your company is trying to do? What are the missions? It's not rocket science. Usually people want to grow revenue, reduce costs, get more customers, drive more traffic. Whatever those things are, we're going to get the facts and figures of what do you spend your time on during your day. And then we're going to start drawing a dotted line connection between that and the main drivers of the organization. And that becomes your, like, hey, I have been doing really good work here. Over the last 6 weeks, I've been contributing on project X, and what I've been able to do is get more things done during this time, or I've been able to get this number of items completed, or this many roadblocks, or this many new customers out the door that we wouldn't have had I not been here. So what are we going to do to make sure that I'm continuing to stay motivated and I'm continuing to contribute at this high level, because I see a future here for myself to not just be at a job, but make this my career at this organization. So that is the CARA method that becomes the real anchor point to how you take that messaging out and upward as you're on your promotion accelerator program.
Yeah, that's crazy because, when you think about it, we're usually reactive to everything, and your whole thing is let's be proactive. Let's take
Purposeful, man.
our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, being purposeful. Yeah. So this ability to track, articulate accomplishments, get to the point to where, when it comes to review, when it comes to promotion, you have the answers, like boom, 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 I have them. And then also, like you said, it gives a career narrative. And you're also identifying the things as like, well, hell no, I'm not going to work on this. They've been having me, do this. I've been assisting sales and I'm in, finance. So I think it's foolproof, and I think it's a foundation principle that everybody needs to look at. And that's so simple. Like you said, you can just drop an Excel sheet, but I know you have the full system on your website. So this idea of an internal campaign, so now we've identified everything. We figured it out. We've got our manager down. He's down the road. We've got him figured out. We've identified our CARA. Now the idea of this internal campaign for promotion, what does that look like?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different. The decision logic is all very dependent and all very customized based on the culture of your organization, based on where you want to go. But as an example, there can be multiple different ways for your campaign to progress. The really like the way that this breaks down is the first 30 days we do a lot of introspective work with my with my clients. I try to establish what is their CARA model, and we look at fulfillment, and then after that we go straight into campaign mode. And those next 30 days is, okay, what are the activities that you should be participating in or exemplifying that are going to really elevate your positioning in the organization? And a lot of times that can be one of the biggest areas where you can add value with very little effort is you can start a club internally at an organization. Works great for those that are consultants. If you're a consultant and you can create a center of excellence, it takes an hour of your week, maybe an hour or half an hour prep and a half an hour to run the call, and you get visibility that way. You're contributing to the growth of your organization. Or if there is a social activity, a lot of times companies have these social events where you can go out and talk to other people at the office. Great opportunity. Why would you pass it up? Like, it's not difficult for you to become visible and exert maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes extra during a week, and you're getting the visibility. Or if you're like, you know what, I don't want to do any of that. I want to just keep doing what I'm doing and making sure that I'm not overexerting myself. That's also fine. We just then heavily emphasize who your two key relationships are with. Again, we'll talk about the line manager and what they in their involvement, and then we'll absolutely need to find that advocate within a center of influence that can be the voice in the room when you're not there. Because that's the number one thing, is that you need to have somebody that's going to be in the room, that's going to advocate for you and say, we cannot proceed without this person on our team, and motivated, and then the last 90 days or the last 30 days to round out the 90 days of the promotion accelerator program is you're going to definitively come out and say, hey, I'm actively looking for a promotion. I'm actively looking for a raise because I have, I know that I'm underpaid. I know that I'm undervalued. I know my contributions are high. These are the areas that I've been contributing on, and I'd like to continue contributing on them in a really strong way. But I'd like the company to meet me halfway, and I'd like to be able to be motivated every time I come into work. And that's that. It's not a one and done process. You don't walk into a room and say, pay me $210 a year, and you shake hands and it's good. It's always start the process, let them kind of settle on it, let them take it back and figure out what they come back with. And then, my clients, we work on the side and say, okay, what was the reaction like? How do you want to spin this? What is the next step? What did they come back to you with? So there's a lot of that like back and forth that we have to round out the next, the last 90 days or the last 30 days in that plan. But either way, more times than not, it ends up in a salary increase, and more times than not, it ends up in a promotion for everybody. So it's a very relationship, stakeholder driven. It's the same type of blueprint that I used to use as a consultant, a technology salesperson. It's all relationship oriented, and it's the best way to get the outcome that you're looking for.
I love that. And something that you said, this reframing of the self-promotion to something that's strategic and thoughtful. And it's a process, not, just self-promotion through arrogance, like having, this narcissistic, everywhere you go, you're telling, it's like, being on the date and, you talk to the girl or the guy and all they do is just talk about themselves the whole time. This is like some action plan. I actually did this, and it was super successful. I started a podcast,
Yeah.
in the organization, and how it's the
Yeah.
same thing. And the CEO's like, hey, let's do this together. Next thing you know, it's like boom, boom, boom. I'm able to interview all the board, everybody, so it's a great way, like you said, starting an organization, a club or whatever. That's a great way for you to get involved and do career advancement and kind of do this proactive internal marketing within the organization, if that makes sense.
Totally. And what I find is that most of the time people they're not super interested in that because they're like, I don't want to become corporate. I don't want to sell my soul to the machine, right? But
Right.
what I try to do is most of the time people are creative. They have other interests. I have guitarists, I have singers, I have ballet dancers, I have percussionists, I have engineers like electronical engineers that are in sales. And they don't get to manifest their hobbies really a lot. It's maybe a half an hour on the weekends whenever they have time every other month. But if we can, and that's why I start with fulfillment, like what are the things that you like to do outside the office? Because if we can find an opportunity for you to do something like podcasting at the organization, and you can interweave a little bit of your passions or a little bit of your interests in what you're doing, the sky is the limit. There's so much momentum that you're going to create because you're going to feel refreshed and be like, okay, I have to do the shitty parts of my job. I have to do the stuff that I don't like, but I also get the opportunity to do the podcast, or I also get the opportunity to talk to people about music. And it's such a good way to get a little bit more fulfillment out of your life and also reap the benefits of becoming visible and driving value for the organization internally.
Yeah, Nate, and you said something that I think is so interesting when I talk to a lot of people and they say the same thing. I don't want to sell my soul. And then I'm like, well, this position's open. It's 450,000 a year. And they're like, where do I sign?
Yeah, let me do it. Let me do it. Yeah, exactly.
But it's always like the manager stepping over to C-suite, or vice versa,
Yeah.
like in the sense of like, and then they have this, well, not vice versa, but they have this versus me, it's like the C-suite versus middle management, and there's kind of this envy, but then there's also this fear of the performance. If I do get this promotion, what is that going to look like? Do you have like negative self-talk, like these people that are saying, because to me, a lot of that is selling your soul. I mean, I get the whole aspect, but if you're in a bad organization, you need to get out anyways, but you have to sell your soul. But a lot of times I think it's just being stuck in that position and being disgruntled. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of that, and I like to find out like why. What's the root of why are you disgruntled? And usually reaction is very similar to what you said. Like they don't understand me, or the C-suite are a bunch of assholes, or whatever that is. But ultimately,
Money.
yeah, money's a big one. But that one's a big one. Like I'm not paid enough. Like you're probably right. That's true. So let's figure out the best pathway to take money off the table, because that's the main thing that we can focus on and at least alleviate that burden. But outside of that, people just want to be like respected. Like they just want to feel like they are valued, and they want to be in conversations where they can be. Everyone wants to make the jump to between. Nobody wants to be tactical anymore. Everyone wants to be strategic. Like that's the big desire I hear a lot, is I want to contribute in a strategic way. And then ultimately they get up to that strategic level and find out it's more chaos than it is anything else. And so there's a lot of that narrative where we figure out what is the true issue. There's no wrong answer. Let's discover that together so that we can really orient the fix for it, because there's gonna be a solution for it. Like you said, if your organization is toxic, if it's really toxic, then let's get the hell out. Or if you're feeling disgruntled because you feel like you don't belong there, that's a separate issue. You're new to management and you're frustrated because you think you're doing it wrong. That's another separate issue. Then we can solve that. But it's important for us to like do some investigation. Like let's really talk about it and not shy away from it, because a lot of people try to keep the peace and just keep things copacetic. Like I don't want to, I'm good, everything's fine. And so therefore everything just gets tamped down, and you never really get to the point where you're resolving it, and you just wind up 10 years later, super disgruntled and bitter at the world. And there's different things that, we could have done to avoid that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of middle managers listen to like Karen type employees because they're the loudest. And so then you've never even met the C-suite person outside of work. You don't even know who they are, but you've listened to this Karen that's, 2 degrees below you, and negative all the time. And now you base this whole view of this person, this suit person wrong. I want to talk about, because you talk about strategy and strategic thinking. I always think of it as like, people have a ton of ideas. Like it doesn't matter, like I don't need another person with ideas. I need tactical execution. Like executing is where, like, yeah, come up with the idea and then execute through. What do you teach in that, as far as creating value through execution?
Yeah, I'm like, you're preaching to the choir here, because the main thing I always try to emphasize is that output is so much more valued than getting it right and taking 2 weeks longer. So let's make sure that you are super strong at delivering rapidly. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. I specialize in workflow like management, so that you're doing the right things at the right time and not totally destroying your work in process and all that other stuff, like the lean house of manufacturing, like that whole side of the equation is definitely within where I started a lot of my careers in that space. So we focus a lot on getting output and getting throughput through the roof, so that you can be seen as somebody that just gets shit done, because there's a lot of value in being seen as somebody that can get shit done. And having that as a skill set as you get higher and higher, then you're like, okay, how the hell do I help other people? How does my team get more things done as quickly as possible? That's a whole other layer of leading a team that has to do that. So we got you prepared for that too, for scale. So it's definitely a skill that is like sort of if there's a essence of what makes you a good employee or somebody that's promotable, if you have the ability to get stuff done quickly, then you got something in favor. You have a pro in your pro and con column if we can get things done quickly.
Yeah. I was thinking of organization I was at before. There was probably 15 managers, and one of them get shit done.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the real reality of it.
That's the reality. Most people struggle with it. Most people, and I don't think it's anything nefarious. I don't think it's anything that's like they intentionally don't get things done, but critical paths and removing blockers is really difficult for a lot of people to do. And if you're thinking about, okay, what skills should I be sharpening? What skills do I really need when I get up to the manager or director level? Every day is different, because every day there are fires. No organization, and I talk to people that work at Google, YouTube, Meta, big organizations, massive ones, global ones, and they have the same issues that every other organization has of getting things done, and everything is on fire, and there's no real like scale involved, and there's no real like support system in place, and there's a whole other conversation around that. But in order to thrive in that environment, you need to be able to define a critical path and try to get stuff done as efficiently as possible. So those two skills are invaluable as you continue your career.
Yeah, I'm going to continue for the time that we have left. I want to continue down this road, because you have the Solid Manager program, and most of the people that are probably listening to, could hop on that program, right now. When someone wants to become a great manager, and they want to look good for their direct reports, what it enables them to scale without burnout?
Yeah, that's the key thing. And really the Solid Manager program is in 3 parts. The first one is, what are your team operations? And it's dumb as it sounds, but the tactical, how do you handle one-on-ones? How do you handle team meetings? How do you handle work distribution? If you don't have those things down, or if you struggle with any aspect of that, you're going to burn out. Because not having good one-on-ones, then somebody's going to bitch that you're not spending time with them. Not having good team meetings, they're going to be confused because they don't know what's going on. If you don't have good work distribution, then you're not going to get things done as efficiently as possible. So we spend a lot of time setting up what I call your command center of how you can talk to the employees, how you can communicate with them on major announcements, and then also how you're tracking work that they're assigned to. That's the first sort of module. The second one is all about scale and expectations. And no company, very little, I would say, very few companies do this well, in the sense of, what are the expectations placed on a team or a business unit or a group, and how is that oriented from the most junior to the most senior? So the Solid Manager program, the heavy majority of the time we spend on defining what makes the manager, the person that's my client, good at what they do. What are the intangibles? What are the tangibles? What are the skills? What are the soft skills? What are the things that they value? And putting them on paper and orienting it against the most junior green person ever to the most senior person that can become your second in command. And let's create this, what people call a career ladder. I call it a competency framework that defines the competencies that are necessary in your group, so that when somebody comes to you and says, I want to move in this organization, I want to grow, you have more than just like shoulders to be able to answer them and say, great, let's talk about your competency framework. The first thing you're going to do is X, Y, and Z. So that is the second area. So, you have your work distribution, you have your how you command, how you run your team, how you scale your team is against the competency framework, and how you can manage their growth and be really responsible for them as good employees, and what a good manager should be doing. And the last one is all about how do you handle the managing up? How do you handle the sort of crazy position that a lot of middle managers are in, where they have people that report to them, and they also have to manage the people that they report up into and the stakeholders there. So third module is all about, I'm a huge believer in servant leadership, and how can you be a servant leader and have your own philosophy as a manager and be able to excel for the people that you report to or your stakeholders, and also not leave your direct reports in the dust, or vice versa, so that you're well positioned in the organization to continue to go. So the Solid Manager program is a great one. I love bringing managers through it, because at the end of the day, they always come out way less stressed, and they have a blueprint to turn to whenever they need it.
Yeah, and I think that there's just lack of clarity. I think that's what causes the stress. We can all experience that when we know we have 20 things on our plate. We're juggling all these plates, and then it's like, which one do I go to? One of the things I want to talk to you about, because I on leading up, because I think this is so important. I get a ton of DMs on this. And two things I suggest just real quick, and I want your feedback on this. Number one is when I have a conversation with somebody that is up, let's say it's the CEO or whoever it may be, a vice president that you're working for, I always ask, I want to know, like, super clear, ultra clear what success looks like.
Yeah.
This position that you hired me for.
Hell yeah.
Number two, what's your preferred way to communicate?
Yes.
Like, do you want email, text? Do you want Slack? Do you want to do it at lunches, drink a beer together? I like get it real specific. And I think this ambiguity is what causes a lot of problems.
Totally agree.
Passive aggressive ambiguity,
Totally agree.
the guy upstairs.
Yep. No, I think that's mission critical. That's like a lot of the manager compass for people that go through the promotion accelerator is like, what is their preferred communication method? Do you know that? Have you ever asked it? You should start there if you don't do that, because a lot of times people don't know, and they just assume, and they kind of like fall their way through a crappy experience. And then does success mean? Is a really good question, because you'll know immediately if the person that you're talking to has a clue of what success means to them. Because if they're just like, I know we do things better, it's like, okay, you have not thought about this. Let me get you what I think success can mean in this role. Or if you get the outcome, which I would say maybe happens like 20% of the time, where they give you what success means, then you have a clear target to hit. Then you're great. You know exactly what you're working towards, and that's even better for you to go out and say, okay, I'm going to crush this because I know exactly what's being expected of me. So totally.
Yeah. And it's so wild. You never know the answer. Like, you cannot guess. You will be, it's like trying to read somebody's mind. I had one guy I had asked that question. He goes, really what I would really want and what I'd really prefer, Jason, is a weekly meeting with
Okay.
He's like, I don't even hardly check my emails. He's like, I don't want to be mean or nothing, but he was telling me that. And I was like, so once a week, we're going to have a meeting where it's just going to be you and I, and you want some slides.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Like,
I can do that. I can crush that. Yeah.
that's exactly. I could crush that. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to, just a couple more questions, before we go. Whenever you have, like, on your website, I think a lot of people don't understand, because you have the internal campaigns, manager strategies.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like with networking? Because that's so hard for millennials and this younger generation, because they're so used to texting and everything else. And a lot of things that we're talking about is being proactive, not the victim. When it comes to visibility and network, what do you teach in that?
Yeah, a lot of it stems with lack of confidence. Most of my clients are millennials or older Gen Z, I think. And a lot of it is that there's so much self-consciousness that prevents the easy things, that prevents the intangibles that will go very far, of being available, being around, not texting on your phone when you're at a social event for like 10 minutes. So there's certain, like, we can talk about all of the patterns that you have as an individual and what your body language is, and coming up with something that you feel comfortable doing so that you are slightly more available, slightly more presentable, if that's something that, that we need to work on. Like, I have one of my clients struggles with eye contact. I don't know why. He doesn't know why. He struggles with it. And I say, okay, man, what you're going to do is that I would rather have you in the ballpark, like looking at the face versus everywhere else. So if you really can't maintain eye contact, look at the eyebrows. Like check out their eyebrows and dial in. I want to know how many eyebrow hairs they have the next time we talk. You know exactly, like just that will help a lot, and it will help. Some of that body language stuff just helps a little bit in shifting the way that you are perceived and the way that you present yourself. The other aspect is that I drill people and saying, okay, next week you're going to present to me. Next week we're going to do interviews. Next week you're going to tell me why you're important, because most of the time people are very shy to talk about themselves. It doesn't come naturally to them to say, hey, I'm good at what I do, and they stumble over it. They don't really have a clear message, and we practice it. It's like, okay, you know what the organization is trying to do, you know what your project mission is, you know what you've been doing, put them together. Tell me, like, what is it that you do here? Tell me that. And I give them all sorts of outcomes where somebody's not paying attention, or when somebody's confrontational, so that they can kind of get used to it, because with repetition, you become more polished in your campaign. It's just like any other campaign. It's like, we'll get you used to it. You're going to get sick and tired of saying it, but we're going to get you used to it so that it is natural and secondhand to you.
That's great. Hey, last question. For a manager listening right now who's committed to significantly improving their leadership, of course, we're going to have the link below that we want people to look at your Solid Manager program. But what would you say would be the one foundational area they can focus on for the next 6 months?
Yes. So, man, there's a lot of things that jump to mind immediately, but I would say for the new manager, or for the manager that's just starting out, you can have really strong impact on employees with just getting the basics right. Schedule and never miss your one-on-ones. If you can do that, you're better than 55% of the other managers. Schedule and never miss them. And I have a one-on-one template that is literally stupid proof. All you have to do is follow it every week and you're golden. For the more seasoned manager, if you're looking to really grow, you need to define what it is that you value. Over the next 6 months, look at the employees that are great. Yourself, look at the people that are great at what they do and figure out why they're good at it, or what it is specifically that they're good at. If you have somebody that's great at talking, or they're just technically excellent at their job, write that shit down and start to build what you value in your team. And those things you can start to build out slowly, the things that are necessary for your team to grow, and you'll be looked at as a rock star by your superiors, because you know what you value, you know how you grow your team, and you manage your team well with non-shitty one-on-ones. So I would say those are the two things that I would recommend to the managers out there.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm glad you went straight to, coaching like that, those one-on-ones. TheStepManager.com, that's your website. Anything else you'd like our listeners to know? Is there anything, like you had said, is there like a download or something they could have on the website?
Yeah, I got tons of free downloads. So check out the StepManager.com. I'm pretty sure on the landing page, there's a link to free resources. So there's tons of different things that you can do. Like I have annual review templates, how to deliver bad news, how to run meetings successfully, all that other stuff. I got it available to you. And then, feel free to reach out. Even if it doesn't mean that you become one of my clients, I'm always happy to spend 30 minutes with somebody and just troubleshoot what it is that they got going on. I'm focused more on delivering value than turning over the quick win. So I'm very, very liberal with my time for folks that need it. So be sure to reach out.